Hey guys, it's William from Junie Lyon Williams Adventures. And there's a subject that was brought to me, and it's something I have thought about since I went through the weekend I went through, and I want to share it with you guys. What I want to talk about for a little while is medical emergencies in the Philippines. That's what we're going to talk about for a little while, guys. Remember, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and we want to thank those that have become members and anyone else that would like to become a member and join Junie Lyon Williams Adventures. Feel free, write down the subscription. Appreciate it, guys. So let's talk about it, guys. Medical emergencies in the Philippines. What happens? What do you do? Am I prepared? We always talk about the good times in the Philippines. We talk about the blue water, the white sand. We talk about the beautiful women. We talk about all the good things that the Philippines has to offer, and there are a lot of good things that the Philippines has to offer. But what happens if something bad happens? What happens if you have a medical emergency? On Saturday, I actually got sick. I didn't feel well. I thought I was having a heart issue. So this is the question. Do you call 911 or 211? Do you call the Philippines emergency ambulance? How long do they take to get there? This is not the U.S., guys. If you were having a medical emergency in the United States, you call 911. The ambulance is there pretty quickly. Especially if you have a heart condition, you have some kind of stroke or emergency condition happening, especially heart attack. And so suppose that you're in the Philippines. Let's say that you're living in the province. I myself am living in Lapu City. But you can forget the ambulance, guys. It's not going to get there in time if you have a heart attack. So I Saturday was in a situation I thought could possibly be an emergency. And I had to decide within a few minutes which direction I wanted to take. Number one, let's just back up for a minute before I finish this story. If you're married, does your wife know your contact information for your loved ones in the U.S. or in the West? Does she have your banking information if there was a medical emergency and you were rendered incapacitated, you couldn't talk, you couldn't function, you had a stroke, whatever the situation may be that brought you incapacitated? Does she know where your insurance is if you have insurance? Does she have access to the insurance card or to money, which you need in the Philippines? It goes back to what all the bloggers say. Do you have an emergency fund? Do you have a contingency plan of how to get to the hospital? A lot of times in the Philippines, it's quicker if you have a plan to get to the hospital instead of you wait for an ambulance to come to you. Do you have a car? Can your wife or girlfriend drive the car? Do you have a motorcycle? At this point, you probably couldn't get on a motorcycle if you were having a heart attack or a stroke or you were in a medical emergency. What would you do, guys? Do you have a notebook or something set aside that your wife or significant other knows what to do? If you have insurance, do you have your insurance representative in a phone number where your wife or your girlfriend knows how to call it if you could not call? Do you have certain money set aside in the house to go where she could get to it quickly if you had to get in an ambulance? Or do you have a plan to knock on a neighbor's door? Have you gotten friendly with people in the community that if you needed to get rushed to the hospital, your wife has a motorcycle, or even if there is a car, can she drive your car? And in an emergency situation, how far are you from the hospital and emergency situation? So these are the things we want to talk about, guys. Medical emergency in the Philippines. Saturday, I felt like I was in a medical, which possibly could have been an emergency. And I was talking to my wife. We had already had a plan. There was a notebook with all the insurance information. I have insurance, inpatient insurance here in the Philippines, which I purchased. Outpatient things I figured I could pay out of pocket, but I wanted to be covered in case something happened. The worst happened. I had a heart attack, I had a stroke, and I had to be put in the hospital. I wanted her to be able to grab one bag and bring it quickly with everything in it. Money, emergency numbers, my insurance representative's number, everything in there that we could grab quickly and go. In my situation, I had figured that after a few minutes, it wasn't a big emergency. I felt like I could still walk, I could still talk. I was feeling good enough. So we got in a tricycle, took the emergency things with us, and went to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, I went up into a doctor's office after sitting for about 25 minutes. And I got to go in and see the doctor in the doctor's office. And I was going to let him evaluate whether he thought I needed to go to the hospital, which was right downstairs. It took a bit to get there in the tricycle, guys. So if you were in a true medical emergency, which thank God I was not, even though it seemed like it could have been in the beginning, what would you do in that situation? Do you have these emergency things? Do you have a bag that your wife or your girlfriend can grab in that situation? Because it's a tenseful situation, guys. Remember, it's still hot outside. You're still going to be in traffic, and you're trying to get to the closest hospital. You're hoping, if you don't have insurance, maybe you're paying out of pocket. So is there a bag with money that your wife or your girlfriend can grab? Does she have access to the credit cards that you can get her to grab if you were incapacitated? These are the questions that came to my mind, and I thought I'd share it with our subscribers and with the others. Because guess what? Sometimes things come up and things happen, guys. And if you had a medical emergency, do you have a plan? That's what you would need. Because failing to plan is planning to fail. Thankfully, I had a plan. Even if it took that I thought that I needed a neighbor. I know a couple of my neighbors that have a car. We don't have a car. We have a motorcycle. And we would have called a cab. And you know that can take a bit to get there. We do have cabs on call of drivers we know. But I have a neighbor that would have took us to the hospital. We talk, and I said if there's ever an emergency, and he said likewise with him. So it's good to know your neighbors, guys, to have some people in the community that you know that you could call that would drive you to the hospital if time was of the essence. Remember, if you have a heart attack or a stroke, there's what they call a golden hour. I worked in a hospital in the U.S., and in that golden hour could be the difference between successfully saving your life and not, guys. So these are the things we want to talk about. If you are coming to the Philippines and you're coming on vacation to meet your long distance relationship, you should have traveler's insurance or enough money to cover a medical emergency, guys. So these are the things that we wanted to just talk about for a few minutes. With that situation happening to me on Saturday, thankfully, it turned out that my situation wasn't a heart situation, but it was an acid reflux and a GERD situation, which can mimic a heart attack. And, if I was having a heart attack, how long are you going to sit in waiting room if you had a heart attack and you're waiting to see a doctor? I sat there for 25 minutes before I saw the doctor, and he evaluated me. And this was at Macton Doctors in Lapu-Lapu City, guys. So if a medical emergency came up, you have to have a plan. Know a neighbor that can get you to the hospital if you live alone. If you have a wife, make sure your wife knows the phone numbers to the insurance agent that would need to maybe guide the way through the hospital, that he could be called right after you got to the hospital so he could arrange the direct pay or whatever that is. I have inpatient insurance, which I purchased. I would pay out of pocket for outpatient care, guys. But I thought if the worst happened and I had to be hospitalized, at least my wife, Junie Lee, she could get on the phone and call the agent that I work with and say he's in X hospital. And I have a number of hospitals that are on a list that would direct pay my insurance to those hospitals. So he said in the worst case scenario, we would see if that hospital you're at, if it wasn't in network, could stabilize you and move you to the hospital that's in network. So these are the things that we would need to know, guys. If the worst case scenario happened, you're in the Philippines living as an expat, and you had a medical emergency, guys. Do you have a plan? That's what you would need to have. If you have a plan, you won't panic as much because you can tell your girlfriend or wife, grab that bag, either call 911 or get the neighbor, or if you have a car, if she can drive the car, because you won't be able to drive, guys. Let's get in the car and let's go to the closest hospital. You should already know where the closest hospital's at, especially those of us that are over 65, over 62, over 65 like myself, and you know that medical emergency could possibly come up even if you're in the best of health. So that's what we wanted to talk about. Remember, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, because here at Junie Lion Williams Adventures, we like to talk about the whole Philippine experience, not just the blue water and the white sand, but things that could come up in whether it's an LDR situation, whether it's a financial situation, or whether it's a medical emergency. These are the things we like to discuss, guys. So being forewarned is being forearmed. Am I right, guys? Remember, have a plan if you were ever in a medical emergency, because it's going to be a tenseful situation. Your wife or girlfriend is going to, you don't want her to panic. You want to have a bag that she can just grab. You want her to know about, some guys don't like to tell their girlfriend or their wife anything about their money, but she's going to have to know some things, guys. How to access the money if you can't. She's going to have to know some of your friends' numbers to call if you can't. She's going to have to know your friends here and your friends back in the U.S., or at least a couple of your family, at least one of them. I make sure that Junie Lee knows my brother. She knows my grandson. She knows my daughter. She talks to them. We know where the hospital's at. We have neighbors that could take us there if it was an emergency, if the ambulance we didn't deem could get there in time. So it's not the U.S., guys. You got to have a plan here. And then be ready when you go to the hospital that you might be sitting in a hallway that's not air conditioned while you're in an emergency situation waiting to be evaluated by the doctor. Thankfully for me, it turned out to be GERD, or acid reflux, which can mimic a heart attack. And I deemed it I thought at first it was a medical situation, medical emergency, and I treated it as such. So these are the things that we got to be prepared for. But I waited about 20 to 25 minutes. I had to actually get in a tricycle and ride to the hospital, which fortunately for us, Macton Doctors is right down the street. But when I got there, once I started walking, I realized if I was in a really true medical emergency, I couldn't walk like I was walking to get around to the doctor's office and let him evaluate if I should go in the hospital. Fortunately, the best case scenario happened for me. The doctor was able to prescribe some medication for GERD, for acid reflux that can mimic a heart attack, and I feel fine now. But I wanted to pass this information on, that those are the things that are important, as I saw. Make sure that you have all your information in one place where your girlfriend or wife or significant other can get to it. Have a plan to get to the hospital, because if you were in a true medical emergency with a stroke or a heart attack, something truly life-taking, you would want to get to the hospital as soon as possible. You don't have time to go around looking for things. So have that emergency bag. Have that emergency money set aside that you can at least get started in the hospital. Even if you don't have a lot of money set aside, some of you, for emergencies, and you have your ongoing monthly budget, have at least 525,000 Philippine pesos set in a bag somewhere to at least get you to the hospital and get you started on treatment. So that's what we wanted to talk about, guys. Remember, be ready in case there's ever a medical emergency that comes up with you. Fortunately for me, God blessed me and things worked out, and it turned out not to be the worst case scenario. But what if it was? I found out that those preparations that I made were the difference between panic and peacefully just going about your business to get to the hospital, even under stressful conditions. So this is William at Junie Lion Williams Adventures. You got comments, guys? Feel free to leave them. We'd like to hear what some of you guys do. What's your contingency plan? What's your emergency plan? Can your wife drive your car? Can your girlfriend drive your motorbike? You couldn't get on a motorbike. So how would you get to the hospital? Let us know, guys, what your plan is. And this is William at Junie Lion Williams Adventures saying, we'll see you next time. See you later, guys.